Okay, so if you've got this far, you should have 4 blocks that all measure 10 by 10 inches. And now you're going to sew your 4 blocks together in 2 rows of 2. And it's entirely up to you now how you position your designs. I'm going to lay mine out to see how they look, and then I'm going to clip them together and sew them with a 1/4 inch seam. So I think that this is the way I'm going to line mine up. I'm going to have the 2 blocks that I've got the half square triangles just diagonally opposite to each other, and then the 2 blocks that I've got the rectangles and the centre square opposite to each other. So literally I'm going to just put these right sides together, I'm going to line them up, and I'm going to pin them. Well, I'm going to clip them actually, but pin or clip whichever way you prefer. And that's the side I'm going to sew down, and I'm going to do exactly the same with this one. So they'll both be sewn down this side, and then they'll open up like so, and then I'll sew these 2 right sides together, and that's going to give me my block of 4 ready for quilting. So I've got my machine set to a 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to sew down each of these seams. Okay, so I'm just going to clip those apart, open them out, and then it's time to sew these 2 rows together. So I'm going to bring this over to this, and then what I'm going to do, because I have got a centre seam, I'm going to line up my centre seam. I'm going to push the seam I've just sewn one way on one of them and in the opposite way on the other, just so that they nest. So this top one's, the seam's all going to go to the right, and the bottom one it's going to go to the left. And I'm just going to line up these 2 seams and clip, and then just put clips in the rest of it to hold it together while I sew it. And now I'm going to sew straight along here. So this is now what you should have. Now don't worry if you've gone a little bit off like I have here, just ever so slightly, because this is all going to get sewn together anyway. It's going to end up slightly smaller. So what I would do now is give this one last press, and then it's going to be time to quilt it. Okay, so now it's time to make the quilt sandwich for the front piece of your cushion. So I've got a piece of fabric here that is about 21.5 by 21.5. Okay, so my quilt block at the moment measures about 19.5 by 19.5, so my quilt top. This piece of batting is about 18.5 by 18.5. Now you can make yours exactly the same size if you want. I prefer to make mine smaller because I find that when I'm sewing it together with what will be the back piece of the cushion, it's not as bulky on the seams. So let me just put this on one side and bring, so this is the back of the front piece, if that makes sense. You're going to make a sandwich of your front piece, and then you're going to have a back piece for your cushion. So this is about 21.5 inches square, and this goes, if yours has got a right or a wrong side, you want right side down, so you're looking at the wrong side. Then you want your piece of batting. I'm just going to kind of place mine centrally. This is all going to get trimmed down once it's all been quilted. And then the quilt top goes on top of that, with the quilt top lined up centrally over your batting. And if you're unsure, just do it this way first. Place your batting on the back of your quilt block, and it will want to kind of cling to your fabric, and then pick the whole thing up and just position that centrally to your piece of fabric that you're going to quilt it to. So I can't get all this in the camera, but basically it's looking like this. So you've got right side down, batting block right side up, with a big border all the way around that's going to get trimmed after this has all been quilted. Okay, so now you need to pin. I'm going to put a few pins in it here and there, and then it's a case of quilting. And again, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to pin it first and then I'll work out how I'm going to quilt it. If you're good with free motion quilting, you could do some free motion quilting. It's entirely up to you. And I'm pinning through all 3 layers to keep it all together. You can use some spray fabric adhesive if you want to. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to go with some pins for now, and then I'm going to work out how I'm going to quilt the blocks. Okay, so I've decided I'm going to do diagonal line quilting. So what I've done, I've got a quilting ruler, but any ruler will do. And I've got my air erasable pen from my ScanNCut machine. And I've placed my ruler in the corner and come to the centre block and drawn a line. And then I've continued that down from the middle to this corner. So I've got 1 diagonal line. So I'm just going to do the same on the opposite corner. So positioning my ruler up on the corner and directly to the middle of the block. And if you're doing free motion quilting, you don't even need to do this at all. So there's my diagonal line. And then I'm going to continue that down to this corner. I could actually leave it at that, just do 1 diagonally that way and that way, maybe a couple this way and a couple that way. This is all obviously personal preference. If you want to continue the diagonal lines both ways, I would probably space them maybe at least 1 inch, if not 1.5 inches apart. So I'll work out what I'm going to do, and then when I've put all my drawn lines in, I'll come back and show you before I start actually quilting. Okay, so I've decided to do diagonal lines. So I've got my first diagonal line going right across the centre. I've got my quilter's ruler. I'm going to line this blue line I've drawn with 1.5 inches on this ruler. And you can line it up nice and easily because you can see the blue drawn line through your ruler. And I'm just going to draw another diagonal line all the way down. So I'm lining the 1.5 inch line on my ruler with this blue line I've already drawn, the first line I drew. And that's going to give me that, and then I can keep coming off those lines at 1.5 inches. And as I said, this is a water erasable pen, so these lines should stay in place until I hit this with water. And just working my way all the way across at 1.5 inches, following the blue line I've just previously drawn. So I'm not sure how well you're going to see this, but I've got all these diagonal lines now at 1.5 inches apart, going this way, and they're the lines I'm going to follow with my sewing machine. So I'm going to start on the middle diagonal that goes from corner all the way to this corner. So I'm going to do that line first and work my way out one way and then the other way, and then I'll do all the opposite diagonal corners. Okay, so I've got my needle in its regular middle position. I've got my quilt top here, and I'm just going to do the first line straight down this diagonal middle line I've drawn in. I'll do a couple and then I'll either speed up the video or I'll just come back and show you when it's all completely quilted. So I'm literally just going to follow this line now. I'm just going to stop with the needle down and I'm just going to move this pin. So I'll put the pin in somewhere else so it's just out of the way. And then I'm just going to sew straight off the point onto this waist fabric. So now I'm just going to come to the next line along and do exactly the same. So as I said, I've started in the middle and I'm doing all these vertical lines going one way, then I'll come and do them all the other way, then I'll turn it and I'll do all the lines coming back. Okay, so here's how it's looking so far. So I ended up deciding to do diagonal lines in both directions. So you saw me draw all the blue lines on and then I came back and I drew some going in the opposite way. So I'm just going to give it a quick press now to get rid of all the blue air erasable pen lines. Well, this is how it's looking front and back. So this is now the front piece of your cushion. So it needs trimming up. And then once this is trimmed up, in the next part of the video, I'm going to be showing you how to attach this to the back and put the zip in. Okay, so that's all done now. I've got most of the blue air erasable lines off it, and I'm now just going to trim all the waist away just up to the edges of the quilt block. So that is the front of the cushion. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to attach the front and the back with the zip, and then the cushion will be finished. So please give the video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you don't already do so, and I'll see you